Hello and welcome. This is Jim Kaufman with Rankin Technical College. In this video, we're going to go through creating a web app using the document object model, also known as the DOM. What I think I'm going to do, usually I kind of go through the guide, then I, move on to the demo most of the time. What I think I'm going to kind of do here, I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth a little bit between the guide and the demo, just because these other chapters, we start getting, like chapter 5 here, it gets a little more complex. Then probably it's best to kind of, break things up a little bit. So we're going to kind of look at some of the concepts here in the guide 5, and then I'm going to move over to the demo, and we'll look at them a little bit more in depth over there. Okay. So building a web app. So a web app is an interactive page built from HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and data as well, right? Working together to do more than simply display static content, right? And in this guide's going to cover, the DOM skills needed to build one from scratch, creating and arranging nodes, restructuring a page on the fly, running code on a timer, opening dialogs and pop-ups, layering overlays on top of a page, and tapping into the browser object model itself, which is called the BOM, right? BOM. Now, what we're doing is we're kind of doing it manually. We're not using frameworks, right? So there's a lot of frameworks and libraries that are available, and you'll learn this more in the second year of this program. Uh, you'll work with React, which is a very popular framework. So React and there's Vue and there's Angular and others. Okay, and these are kind of frameworks that kind of help with managing that DOM. Okay, but we're just kind of going to be using kind of the basic stuff here, just so you can learn kind of the basic skills of the DOM. All right. Those frameworks really help with managing the state of an application as things change on your screen. Okay, and they're very powerful. But we're just kind of looking at the basic native document object model, and we're going to be handling all these things kind of very manually, right? But it's very important to learn that. It's a good foundation prior to moving into these frameworks and libraries. So designing a web app. So web apps behavior typically rests on four foundations working together: the HTML, the app's container and structure, the app's appearance is the CSS, right, or styling. Then you got your JavaScript is the app's operation and output, and then data often loaded from an external file or server, right? For the most part, we're not going to be doing much with the data. So the data stuff, we're not really accessing backend stuff. So we'll just kind of, in some cases, we'll kind of mock up some data, right, that we use, but we'll kind of have that within our files itself, right? So a web app is rarely self-contained. Beyond its own HTML, CSS, and JavaScript files, it commonly depends on outside data, whether that be a small JSON file, and JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation, okay? An image library, a live database connection, etc., right? So introducing nodes. So nodes and the node tree. A node is a distinct entity representing an element, attribute, comment, processing instruction, or text string within a web document. Every node in a document is organized into a hierarchical structure called a node tree. The root node sits at the very top of that tree. Okay, nodes relate to one another the way members of a family do, right? Basically having a parent, you have a parent node, you have a child node, right? Parent node is directly above another node in the tree. A child node directly nested within another node, okay? And a sibling, a node that shares the same parent of another node. Okay. So here's just showing, you basically have your document. That's a little strange, but that's okay. So here's just a section where you've got, and this is what we're going to kind of look at a little bit down here. So we got a section and articles, okay? So in this case, the section is the parent of the articles here, right? And each of these articles are the sibling, right? Each of these articles are siblings to each other, but they all share the same parent, which is the section. So the articles are wrapped within a section. So referencing nodes by relationship or index. Nodes can be referenced through properties describing their family relationships or through their position in a node list. A collection of nodes indexing starting at 0, right? Node list is a collection of nodes. Okay, index, we're always used to these indexes. We've all kind of worked with this already now. We know that, usually many things are 0 based, right? So in this case, the same thing. Each node in a node list, it starts with 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. Right? It has a length property, right? Reporting the total count, much like an array or an HTML collection. Okay, property node.parent node, and this is the single parent of the node, right? So you take a specific node and you say, hey, get me the parent, right? That's what you're kind of doing here. This node, whatever the node is, give me the parent, right? This is the single parent of the node. Node.child nodes, right? So a node list of every child node includes text and comments, right? And comment nodes. So like if you've got a article, a div, whatever, you're always going to have, a lot of time, you're going to have some child elements of those, okay? So you're going to have some child elements of each of those nodes. Children, okay? A node list of only the element type child nodes, okay? So children is if, the child nodes kind of give you pretty much everything, right? Whereas the children are going to give you, in our case, our parent up here, right, was this section, right? The child nodes is going to give you everything, right? The text, everything of all of this, right? Whereas the children is just going to give you the basic one, right? Each article. This is a child, this is a child, this is a child, right? The child nodes is going to give you the text and the comments, okay? We'll take a look at that here. The first element child of a node, all right? And then, so what you can do is called traversing the DOM, where you're actually moving through the DOM. So if you could be processing some things, right? You could grab the first element. You're going to do maybe some processing on that first element. You get done with that, you're going to maybe move to the next element, right? So you can use the next element sibling, right, to get to that next one. And that's kind of traversing the node. You're moving through that DOM, right? Moving through the DOM. Okay, so here's that example from, let's see, was this kind of the same? Yes, catalog. Okay, good. All right. So here's a section, right, with two articles, right? Item 1 and item 2. One is sourdough loaf, right? And baguette, right? So you got two items here, and what you do is to get the children of these, right? So first you're going to get the parent, right? So the catalog, you get element by ID catalog here, right? So, and this is the name you're giving that. Then from that you can do .children.length, okay? So this has two children, right? Has two children, so the .length on that's going to be 2, right? Here you do catalog, right? Then do first element child, right? .id, right? And this will give you this one, right? Okay, selecting nodes with query selector all. The query selector all A method builds a node list of every element matching a given CSS style selector anywhere within the document or a specific element. Okay. So basically, whatever the parent node is, dot selector all, right? And give it the name of the what it is, right? The element of the class, right? In this case, you've got dot product card. So this is going to give you all of those, right? So you're going to have now you're going to have a node list, right? So query select all, a static snapshot taken at the moment it is created. Adding new matching elements to the page afterward does not change the list. Okay. HTML collection. You can do get elements by tag name. So this is a live view of the document, automatically updates whenever matching elements are added or removed from a page. Okay. So it's kind of interesting and important to know, that the node list is basically a static snapshot taken at the moment it is created, right? Whereas the HTML collection is kind of a live view of the document, automatically updates when that matching elements are added. Okay, so that's the difference there. All right, so let's go ahead and look at the demo a little bit. Okay, so here we've got mission control, right? Just demo, creating a web app using a DOM. Nodes and node tree, right? So here, let's go ahead and look at the code first, and then we'll come back here and look at this, okay? So let's go ahead and let me bring up the code real quick here. Okay, so this first one is the node tree, right? So we've got an ID it's a div with an ID of satellite fleet, right? And we have 3 different articles, right? Each of them having their own unique ID, and also they all have the same class called SAT for satellite short, satellite card, right? Satellite card, satellite card. So we got 3 of these, right? Now, if we go back to our thing here, we've got these different buttons. Parent node, right? These I'll just click on them real quick, okay? Parent node is just basically, and we're kind of writing to this just, for display purposes. So that's the parent node. Here's the children, right? And this is going to actually highlight some things up here as well. So I'm going to click this, and you can see it highlighted all of these. And it's showing those 3 that we just looked at, right? The alpha, beta, gamma, right? Them are the different IDs. And then I'm going to click this one, first element child. It's going to highlight this up here, the alpha station, right? And it'll display down here as well. So here's that one. And it highlighted alpha station, and it shows the information about that first element child, which the ID, right? Satellite alpha, node name. Okay, the node name is an article, right? Text node, right? That's the text that's there. Okay, and we'll look at that a little bit more, but let's just kind of go through these. Then we have next sibling, right? So then the next sibling is going to be, right, beta probe. Okay. And if I click the next sibling after that, oh, that's it. Sorry. Query select all. It's going to basically give you all of these, right? So there's all 3. Okay. Kind of the same here, in a way to, this, but different just how we're getting that, okay? We're doing the query select all, right? We'll take a look at that. Then also we have this live versus static, which we were just kind of talking about. The difference, between using the node list and the HTML collection, right? Okay, so let's go back here for a minute and look at this code a little more, just so we can sync things up. So we have these little buttons that we were just clicking, right? Button parent, children, etc. Right? We already looked at this. All right. We already looked at those. Okay. So if we go look at the JavaScript here, so we're adding some event listeners, right? The button parent, right? So once again, you add an event listener, and basically this is what you're doing is registering this event, right? This happens when you're loading your file, your JavaScript file generally. Depends on how you set things up, but it's basically loading it's kind of registering these different events. Okay, so you kind of plan this. This is how you kind of can handle these things. When an app gets loaded, it reads that JavaScript in, right? You're adding these different event listeners. And so in this case, you're adding this event listener, right? So when you add this, it doesn't run this. Just kind of, we've already talked about this, but just kind of as a quick review. When you register this event, it's just registering it. So then when you do, it's registering it and it's associating it with this button, right? It's associated with this button. You're registering an event with this button so that when you click it, it's going to execute this, right? So it doesn't execute this just when it registers it, but it's there and available when that time comes. So when you do click on that button, it's going to call this clear highlights, right? So let's open that up. Right here. So basically what it's doing is, because we remember we had those little highlights at the top there, just to bring that back up real quick. We have these things highlighted, right? In this case, so it's all just resetting these. It's resetting these every time when you click on the next button, it's going to reset them so it doesn't get messed up, right? Okay. And it's just removing that highlighted because later on we go ahead and add them highlights, okay? But in this case, for the parent button, we just clear the highlights. Here we're getting the fleet.parent node, right? So let's go find fleet here. So fleet is set up here, this is kind of a setup function, setting this up at the beginning here, all of these, right? So the fleet is the satellite fleet, and that was the div we were looking at, right? And then we've got output. Output's that output box that we're using as well, right? So this is our output box, right? Okay. So that's where that comes from. You got your fleet, you got your output, you've got your clearing your highlights. So you clear this, basically now you get your fleet parent node. That was basically that div with those 3 children, right? And then this is just outputting this, right? This is outputting that in that little box we've seen, okay? Children versus child nodes, right? So we're doing same thing here. We're registering all these events. We always clear the highlights. And that's just for this demo, right? Not necessarily your assignment you need to do all this, but just kind of showing you ways you can kind of do some dynamic things on your pages, okay? So one thing is .children as opposed to .child nodes. So .children only element type, right? Only element type, child nodes, right? Child nodes here is all child nodes, elements plus text nodes plus comments, everything, right? So let's take another look at that real quick. So we're doing the button children. We're going to click on that. And we're going to see the differences there a little bit, hopefully. It's probably not that intuitive, but child nodes. So we already had that clicked, right? So if we get to children.length, right? Since children is going to be the element nodes only. So the children of the parent, right? Fleet is the parent. So fleet is the parent. And when you do get the children of your parent, right? That's going to be the element nodes only, which is basically, right? Your three ones, right? All 3 of these, right? Now, if you get the child nodes.length, right, this is going to give you everything, right? Any text, white space, everything. So that's why the length is different for the child nodes, because you're getting more than just the element nodes itself, right? You're getting all the text, everything else, okay? So note, child nodes count more than children because white spaces, new lines between tags is stored as text nodes in the DOM. Okay. Let's see if there's anything else. I do want to point out a couple things that I don't think, like last week, I probably on the debugging stuff went through enough, right? But we can come in here. So if you go with within the Developer Studio, with Chrome, developer tools here, go to sources, right? You should have your JavaScript in here. So what you can kind of do here, and this becomes very valuable for debugging purposes, right? You can put a breakpoint right there, right? So when I go ahead and click this parent node, it's going to stop right here, right? So this is very good here. Let's not even stop here. Let's stop down here so we can see some values that I already got put in here, So let's go ahead now. So now we've got this set. Now if you click parent node, it's going to execute, right? And it's going to stop at this line. So I'm going to click parent node here. And there you go, paused in debugger right here. So basically you can hover over some things to see some values, right? Sometimes this is always easy to understand, but it's something you kind of learn within time, right? Other things you can also do is right click, and you can, maybe you can't do that quite here. Watch variables. You can do this. Let's see if this is going to work for us. Output. So here you can actually watch on variables, right? So you can always add a bunch of different variables. So you can be watching those. Obviously, when you hover over to, it depends on what you're hovering over. If you got something where you're getting a value, right, it's a lot easier. When you're getting, like a node or something like that, there's a lot with that, right? It's basically, all of this, right? You're getting all of this, right? Now, if you're getting just a value, like, right, then, when you hover it over it, you're just going to see a value, right? But very handy on debugging, putting in breakpoints like this, right? So I kind of showed you a couple different things here. Is one putting a breakpoint, and you put in other ones as well, right? And if you want to have multiple, right? Let's just go ahead and continue here on this one. So up here, this might move around depending on how your screen's set up, right? But you've got these options for resume, script, right? Step over, step into, right? Step out, right? All depends on what you want to do. And I suggest you play around with this and learn this, spend some time with it, okay? So I'm going to click this just for now. So we're stepping out. I'm going to do this again because this time now it'll go ahead and hit parent. I click this again, it's going to go to that first one. If I click resume like this, it's going to go to the next breakpoint, okay? So something to keep in mind. So sometimes you might end up with two. You can always remove them if you, right? And things like that, okay? Obviously, refresh the page. You're still going to have your breakpoint though, okay? So you click here, it's still there. So you're going to have to watch that, and you can always debug, kind of unselect it, right? So now we're good. So we refresh, we're back to that. So I suggest you spend some time with the debugger. It's really going to help you out. It's going to really help you out with debugging these different things. Okay. All right. So the next thing, let's go back here now, and let's look at Creating and connecting nodes. So document fragments. A document fragment is a combination of nodes that has not yet been attached anywhere in the document node tree. It exists only in computer memory until it is appended to an existing node, at which point it becomes visible part of the page. Okay. So yeah. So you can be creating something. You can create this, create element, do all of this. If you don't use it, if you don't attach it to, if you don't attach it to an existing node in that document object model that's already there, right? You can create a new element, do all of that. If you don't attach it to anything, it's not going to display on the page, right? But once you create it, and then you can use like append child, right? There's different options there, but when you create a new element, so basically you're creating, when you say creating an element, you're creating a new tag, right? You can create a new div tag. You can create anything, an image, any kind of tag, right? Set the attributes, everything, all the properties, and once you append that, it will display on the page, right? So the create element method builds a brand new element node of a specific type. The new node is not yet part of the page. It must be appended to an existing node with append child before it appears. So here you're just showing you're creating a new element called tag name. Okay. Well, not name tag name. Tag name be a div, image, img, div, article, section, whatever, right? Whatever, an HTML tag name, right? I said with the name tag. No, but it's going to be the name of an HTML element, right? A valid element. All right. And then once you create that, then you can append it to an existing node, whatever one you want to be the parent, whatever parent, right? So obviously you go up the tree, your document is the very, very root, right? Then you go down, you've got usually, a body tag, and under that, depends on, where you're at in your document. You might have, under your body, you got a main tag, and under that main tag, you have a section 1, and under section 1, you have article 1, right? And then you may want to have a second article underneath that section. Then you would just create element with a new article tag, right? Obviously, you're going to want to do more than that. You're going to add some text or whatever, right? But that's just a little more on top of that. And then you're going to append it, right? So in this case here, you're creating a new paragraph node and add it to a catalog section. So document.create element. So you're basically creating a paragraph, right? And then this is the catalog. So you're getting your catalog, right? And in this case, what was our catalog? Our catalog was up here, right? So we're adding a paragraph to that catalog. So we get our catalog, and then we take our catalog and we append the child of the new item. So now we've got a paragraph, right? But obviously, like I just kind of said a minute ago, you're going to have to add some text, something else. It's just going to be empty tags. But this is creating a new element, right? And you actually, if you viewed this, you may not see it. You ain't gonna, you may take up some extra space on the page, right? But there's not going to be any data there, any text there until you add that as well, right? So element nodes and HTML attributes. Every HTML attribute corresponds to a node property of the same name or a similar named one. Setting that property directly adds or changes the attribute on the element. Okay. So here you're creating a new paragraph tag. Okay. You got new item, right? Now you got new item.id. You set the ID to item 3, right? So now we're adding some things, right? We're adding some attributes and so forth, right? We can add a class name now. We'll take our new item, add a class name, right? And call that product cart, right? So that's going to set that class attribute. The class list property, okay, offers a more flexible alternative to class name. This is one way to do it, right? Okay. But the class list kind of adds some more flexibility for managing multiple classes. And usually when you get something more complex, you have multiple classes, especially while you're using Bootstrap or Tailwind or, even just pure CSS, doesn't take long. You're adding, you usually have some ones where you're going to have multiple classes on there, right? So class list is better for managing multiple classes since it can add, remove, or toggle individual classes without disturbing others already present. Okay. So yeah. So here you're just you're setting one class name, right? Here you can add, you have a class list, right? So your class can be multiple, right? Usually, you're gonna have spaces in between them, right? On an HTML element, and then you can actually do an add to add a new class, or you can remove one that's already there, or you can toggle, right? Adds it if it's missing, removes it if it's present, which is really nice. Toggling, so it's going to go say, hey, is featured here, is featured here. If it is, get rid of it, right? Otherwise, add it, right? Nodes and inline styles. Okay, let me go look at where we're at. Let's go back to our thing here. So here we're creating and connecting nodes, right? Okay. So we're adding to our roster. So we're actually adding, what we're doing here is we're creating a new element and we're appending it, right? So let's go look at the code here on that, which we're kind of looking in the guide, but let's go ahead and look at the code for that. Let me find that real quick. So we're getting the crew roster, we're getting all these different things, right? So we have a crew name that we added, right? Susan, and then we had a role being the pilot, right? We have some other ones as well. Okay. So we'll add the crew member node. So here we're doing input dot trim. Okay. Okay, we're just getting that. Remove the placeholder text if it exists. Okay. So what we're doing, we come down here, create a new element node, right? So once we entered that data, click that button, right? And then we're creating a new element called article, right? And then we're taking that card and we're giving it a class name of crew card. Okay. And then we have some little bit of logic here. If the role includes commander, we're going to add another, we're using the class list this case, right? First, we're adding a class name called crew card, right? Then we come down here, and if it includes commander, we're going to grab the, we're going to grab that class list from the card and add priority to it, right? We're adding an extra CSS class for commanders, right? And we're coming down here and we've got a name span, right? We're creating a span tag, okay? So document. So right now what we created here, we're creating these things, okay? When we get done with this, even though we created this, it's not going to reflect on the page until we append it, right? It needs to be append to a parent, right? So we create a new variable called namespan. We're creating a new element called basically two ones, one for name, one for role, both span tags, right? First one has a class name of crew name, right? And then we're using the text content. So that's another attribute, right? So our span tag now has, both a class name of crew name and we're adding a text content of the name that we entered that was defined up at top here, right? The name that was entered in that field. Okay, and then our row span here, pretty much the same thing. Oh, so this is saying basically here, if the text content, we add the role, So what this will do is it's basically going to do one or the other, right? So this actually is a truthy, falsy thing. So basically, when it reads this, right, when this gets interpreted by the interpreter, it's going to say, hey, does this have a value? If it does, put it here. It's not going to read this. It's just going to skip this altogether, right? It's going to know that this is an or. So if this is truthy, it's going to use that. If it's not, right, it's going to put this in there. Okay. Let's see what we're doing here. Okay, so then we're doing, remember we had that priority one, right? So if it contains priority, let's take another look. Priority for commander. So if you put commander in there, you've got the class of priority added. Now you're taking that, and you're doing a little bit more. You're adding some other, not that you necessarily want to do this, just kind of example of things you could do, right? Just giving you examples and showing you what's possible. So here you're adding a border left to this, right? 3 pixels solid. Obviously, this could all be done within the priority class itself, the CSS itself, right? This is just showing you that you can actually add this right there to that, right? It's other options, right? So you're actually adding another style. It's just showing you, using all these different attributes. You got a card. The card has a style, right? You could do a border left, right? These are all attributes that are available within the DOM, and you're adding this additional style, right? Make sure camel case is very important on all these things. You have to class list, camel case, border left, camel case, right? Very important, right? Okay, now you're building your subtree. So all the way up to this point, you can do all this stuff. If you didn't append it, it's never going to show up on your screen, right? So now you're taking the card that you created. Well, not that you created. That's already part of this. Let's go find our card. Well, we create another element, right? So this was a new one we created, right? We appended, right? And then we added this other stuff to that card, right? And then we created some other ones. We created span tags, right? Now what we're doing is just appending. Oh, didn't mean to do that. Let me grab that. So I don't know what I got a little wild there on that one. So now we've got these card, which was a new one we created, the article, right? And we're appending these different span tags, one for name and one for role. But like I said, now it's still, even though we appended it, that card is still, hate to use the word, I guess it's still orphaned, right? It doesn't have a parent yet because we created a new one, right? We created new cards. We created that new card, which was the article, and we created the new span tags. But they still aren't attached to something that's already existing in the DOM, right? So here we got our roster now, right? So we look at our roster, and that's defined. Let's just go to that. Defined here at the top, this is our crew roster, right? So this is an existing thing, and now we've added all of that, right? So now we're appending that card. So now that card will have all of that information, right? Okay. And, this is always good to do. Once you're kind of done with that, you've already appended that stuff. You can kind of clear out some stuff, okay? Especially when you're doing some dynamic things on a page and there's different things they could choose that manipulates things. You kind of want to make sure that you clear some things out, and you're putting focus in there as well, right? So focus is on that specific item. So let's just go back to the page there. After all that, so what was that, commander? Put in Joe here, and let's see, make Joe commander. See if this is going to work out. There you go. So we got Susan, who was a pilot, and we got Joe commander, and it added. it added that class, and then it also added a little thicker border on the left. Why, I don't know, but just kind of showing you what you can do, right? So this added the class, and also, both of these added classes, but this one added that different class. This is the priority class, right? And then on top of that, you ended up adding a additional styling on top of that, right? And so what this did, and remember when we seen the resets there, that reset these these, so that it doesn't stay in there, right? So then you can add more crew members, right? And then focus went back here, right? Focus went here. So let's see. Let me just look at that again. So yeah. So clear out your name input, clear out your role input, and then put focus back in that field, right? So we put focus right back in that field so you can add more. Okay. And that's always kind of very preferable to do. Always try, it depends on what's the purpose of your page, but usually a lot of times, you kind of want to control the flow of things, and to control the flow of things, you want to add that focus in certain places, right? And in this case, you're creating new crew members, and that's the purpose here. So you want to keep on adding that focus back in here until the user clicks out of there. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Let's look at the code here again. So real quick, before we move on to that next thing. So we do have the clear roster here. We'll clear this out, right? So let's kind of look at the code for that real quick here. So to clear this out, basically you're taking the roster, inner HTML, wiping out all children at once, right? There's different ways to do this. Probably this is one of the easiest thing. So basically you built that roster up right here, right? And you appended all these children to it, right? Now you just do roster.innerHTML equals empty string, and it's gone, right? Here it's showing you to put a placeholder, right? So let's see, if we look at our screen again, we've got this placeholder right here. This is our placeholder, right? So here we got we're creating a new element called the p tag, right? Placeholder.class name. So we got text. Here's our text content, right? So we gave it a class, which is placeholder text. We gave it text content, which is crew roster is empty. Add a new crew member above, and we appended that to our roster, right? So we cleared out our roster with all the crew members, and then we went ahead and put the placeholder in there, okay? All right. So we have text content versus inner HTML. So type a message below. Try include an HTML tag like, okay, let's just do it. Let's grab that. Then compare out each property handles it. Sent via text content, right? So this is what it will return, right? From JavaScript, this is what it would return. Text content, HTML tag shown as plain text, safe for user input. Let's send via inner HTML. Okay. Hello. Right? So this is getting you the more than just the inner HTML. Inner HTML is basic hello, right? So you're getting kind of the whole object here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the code real quick here. So once again, we've got another event listener for this one. And so text content does not render HTML, okay? So that's the biggest thing. So text content does not render the HTML. Tags appear as literal text. So safe for user supplied content where rendering HTML could be dangerous. Okay. Here, add a note explaining what happened. Yep. So here's your text content, and basically it's just spitting that out. All right. Here, enter HTML. Input.value, pulse detected. So it's just, the text is this text input.value, okay? The text input.value, okay, is going to return the text, whatever you put in there, right? Whereas this is actually kind of returning you the object, okay? It doesn't render that HTML. It doesn't render that what's in there. Okay. Let's see what's next here. Build nodes from a data array, document fragment patterns. Mission manifest array lives in, yep. Click a button, one node per item, and append them all at once. Okay, let's take a look at that. So in here, we're building a manifest from a data array, data that we have here in this file, okay? So let's go ahead and, so first we are setting the manifest list inner HTML to empty, just to clear out if something was already there, right? So let's just go to the definition on that one, which is getting the element by ID, right, of mission manifest. So we come over here to the HTML, we'll look at, here's mission manifest. So mission manifest is just an unordered list, right? With nothing in between, right? So we're actually going to be using JavaScript to build this, to build all the tags inside of this mission manifest, right? Inside this unordered list. Okay, let's see. Go back to where we were here. Okay, so then we also have this mission data, right? So we have a mission data array. We'll go take a look at there in a second. It's declared at the top here, drives the node creation, right? So we're looping through this data that we already have, and we're building everything out from that, right? We're building all these list items out of that, right? Adding some additional span tags, appending everything, and right, and then putting everything on its parent, right? So that it'll display on the screens. So let's go ahead and take a look at that real quick. So here's the mission data. You got a name, you got a status, you got an orbit, right? So here's all your data, name, status, orbit, right? For each one of these, alpha survey, meta repair, gamma deploy, delta return, epsilon probe, and zeta relay. So here's our data. So you can kind of, this is a way to do this where, and your data may be external to this, but, here's just an array that you've got defined in a page. There's other ways to do this as well. Obviously, when you got frameworks and you've got outside data sources, that's a whole different level of things, right? But this is just showing you how things like this can be done. And this does help you prepare for that because, eventually you will have like arrays of data coming back from some external data call, right? And you build that and use that within your application. Okay. So basically we're just looping through that whole array up there that we just looked at. We're looping through that whole array, right? Grabbing each one. So we grab the first one, right? This is going to be let's say we start in that subscript 0, right? Index 0. So the very first one in the list, and then we're going to go ahead and we're creating a new item, right? Add a new class name called manifest item. And then we're getting some data out of each one, right? Of that array. We got a name, we have a status, right? And we're grabbing all of that. and we have an orbit as well, right? We have a name, a status, and orbit, and we're basically just creating elements. We create the list item and then the spans. The spans have a name, and then the second span has both a status and an orbit, right? Then what we're doing is we take our item, which is our list item, right? Item's always a good variable to use when you're doing a list item, right? Item. So obviously this is a name that you're giving it, right? Programmer, right? Decided name. Item dot append child. So you're appending the name span, right? And the status span. And so once again, even though you've done all of this, this still is not going to be viewable on your screen until you append this to a parent node that's available on your screen, which is your manifest list, right? Which was this tag, right? That's your parent tag. So it's not going to be viewable until you do that, right? But there you go. So let's just take another look at the screen there on that. I'll hit refresh here. I guess we can get rid of our debugger for now. Build our manifest, and there it is, right? So these are all dynamically built, right? These are all list items with two different span tags each, one with the name and one with the status and the orbit, right? Okay. Restructuring the node tree. So mission queue cards below are existing. Here, let's go back to our guide and see where we're at. I probably got too far ahead. So we already talked, a little bit ago, we were talking about you can actually get the style of a node. You can change, right? So in this case, you change the color, right? Background color. So once you have that, whatever it is, whatever HTML element you have, you can change the style of all kinds of different things. Always remember, most of these are, this is something you have to get used to too. Background color, you know how for our CSS we do background dash color, right? But for the DOM, it does it differently. You're going to have background camel case color, right? So it's going to be camel case background color, just like that, right? So that is the same. This, right, this background color right here means the same as this in the CSS. Know that can be a little bit confusing. That's just kind of how it works, right? So an inline style can be added either through an HTML style attribute or in JavaScript through the style property. Okay. CSS property names that contain hyphen become camel case when accessed as a JavaScript property. Okay, adding content. So we kind of already did this. The text content and the inner HTML, right? So the text content property inserts plain text into a node, treating any HTML-like characters as literal text rather than the markup, right? The inner HTML property inserts a string that is interpreted as HTML, allowing nested tags and symbol entities to render as actual markup. Okay, so warning here, use text content whenever the value being inserted might come from outside data, such as user input. So I do want to comment on this a little more. You always have to be careful. You always have to be careful in application development that you never know what data you're getting. Whenever you get, data that you can control within, that you wrote, that you're kind of controlling yourself is one thing, but any external data is different, right? Any data that's you're reading in a file that you didn't create, you're reading in a file, you're getting data from a database, all of that external data, and you have to be very careful about what it is, okay? Just kind of something to always remember. And that's on multiple different levels within application development. We're just talking about it here from this perspective, but also from validation. You always want to check. You always want to validate, you never know what data you're getting. You don't know, it could be malicious data. It could be something that a user entered that was completely incorrect, or he was supposed to upload a text file and uploaded an image, right? All these different things. So you always have to do some validation and checking and verification of anything external, okay? Just to make sure that, like I said, it's not malicious code, that it is what you expect it to be, okay? But that's beyond this a little bit. Just kind of wanted to add that though. But like it says, whenever values being understood might come from an outside data, such as user input, since inner HTML will render any embedded markup, which can introduce unwanted formatting or security risk, right? I was kind of really talking a little bit more about security risk, right? And from our case, for what we're doing right here, you could enter something wrong within the field on a screen, and you got unwanted, incorrect data, and it may format that strangely or not work at all, whatever, right? Okay, building a document fragment with a loop, and this is what we just did with the mission manifest, right? So this is just doing a for loop, same thing. You're building this, important thing, always remember to append the child to a root. Okay. Use the browser's built-in debugger to inspect the live node tree of a page as it changes, confirming that new nodes were created and attached exactly where intended. So let's go ahead and do that in the browser here. Let me refresh this page. Let's see, we're at the right place here. So this is our mission manifest, right? We were just looking at. Let's go to our code here. I'll make this a little bigger. We'll make this a lot bigger here. We only need is to press that button. So let's go. So this is our mission data, right? This is the code we're looking at in Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to go ahead and put some breakpoints in here. So let's put a breakpoint in our for loop when we're looping through our data, right? Our mission data that we have defined at the top. And let's go ahead and put it where you add some things, okay? So we're going to add there. And let's look at it when it gets added right here as well. Okay, so it's going to get added. The spans are getting added to the item, right? And then the manifest list is getting that item, right? Adding that, the items being appended to that parent manifest list. So let's go ahead and put a watch in here. Make this a little smaller. So let's add manifest list, right? So it's not going to find that right now, but that's okay. And our other was item. Let's do item as well. Okay. So we have these not available. So now let's go ahead, and we got our breakpoints in here. Let's go ahead and click build our mission manifest. So I'm going to click on this, and we're in that loop now. Okay, still same thing. Well, it does find that tag because that was, that was actually built. That was set up there, and that JavaScript was set up towards the top of the file, right? So now we have a reference to that manifest list, right? We come down here, it's got child element count of 0, so it's on it, and that's what we expect, right? We just had that blank, empty, I shouldn't say blank, empty, unordered list, right? UL. But it is an unordered list, okay? Item hasn't even been created yet, so this is not even available. It doesn't even, debugger doesn't even know about that. So let's go ahead and click up here and click the resume. So what it's going to do, it's just going to pop on down to the next thing if you're doing resume, right? Otherwise, you can obviously just step over to the next item. It'll go one by one. So here, let's do that one time here just to show that. So we're basically going here. Now we've got our item. You see how our item all of a sudden is here, right? Okay, step over. So now we've got a class name. It showed that app popped up. That manifest item popped up right there as well, right? And we're adding now a new span tag, which I haven't here. Let's do that one as well. Why not? We'll just do one of them. Let's do the okay. And so it's got a span tag too, right? It can find it now that it was created as a variable, right? It populated that variable. Okay, let's just continue here on that. Adding your status. Adding that orbit there. This always wants to need more room here. Let me move this even over there more. Okay. So now we're appending. So our item does not have a child node, right? Count 0. So I'm going to go ahead and click this again. Now if we come down here, look, our child element is a 1, right? We have a child list, right? We have children, right? We have the span tag now, right? We have this span tag. Okay. And then, so our manifest, what's our manifest up here? So we go to our manifest. Where's our child list? So 0, child element count 0, right? Once we go ahead and click this again, now if we come down here, you'll see your child element count is 1, right? And you will see your child nodes. So now, our list item is now on our manifest list, and our span tag is, come down here, we have 2 because I only captured the name span, right? Not the status one. And then on that one, right, we've got our, what am I doing here? I need to click the right thing. So here's our 2 span tags, right? 0 and 1. One for name, one for status, okay? So it's going to make your life a lot easier. You can spend some time with this debugger, learning how to go through these things. It'll help you debugging things. So please spend some time on that, okay? So I'm just going to go ahead and clear this all out. Let me get rid of everything here. We're good. Hit this, and I think everything is done now. Might as well just clear out. And, you know, always kind of clear things up, especially, you know, stuff gets held on to sometimes. So clear everything out. Depending on what you're doing, you might want to keep it there for a while, but, you know, eventually it's probably a good idea to clear it out. Okay. So, yeah, I think it was worth taking a look at that. Let's go back to our, actually we need to go back to our mission control thing here. There we go. Sometimes hard to grab those things, isn't it? Okay, so that was our manifest. Here, might as well refresh our page. Just leave this up, but leave it over there a little bit. Okay, we're good. Okay, restructuring the node tree. So let's look at that a little bit. So restructuring a node tree. So moving nodes with append child. The append child method does double duty. In addition to attaching a brand new node, calling it on a node that already exists somewhere else in the document, moves that node to the end of that new parent's child list. Okay, removing it from its original position automatically. Okay. So here's showing you move the first image in a gallery to the end of the list, right? Producing a left shifting slideshow effect. Okay. So in this case, you're getting the element gallery, getting that first image. Okay. Grabbing that first image from your gallery, right? and taking your gallery dot append first image. Move the first image of the gallery to the end of the list. I don't know if that really explains that very well, but okay, well, we're going to look at some code on that. Okay, and then, on the demo here, moving nodes with insert before. So let's look at this too. The insert before method places a node at any position within the child list, not only the end. Okay, it requires two arguments: the node being moved or created, and the existing sibling node it should be placed in front of. Okay. So in this case here, you've got the same thing from up above. You got a gallery where you've got the last element child. So you're taking, now you got the last element child, right? So insert before the last element child, the first element child, right? So that's insert before. Move the last image in the gallery to the front. So yeah, I kind of said that backwards. You're moving the last image in the gallery to the front list. Okay. Let's see where we're at on this. Time commands. Okay, we'll talk about the clone stuff too. Cloning a node. So the clone node method copies a node's DOM content. Any JavaScript properties separately attached to the original node, such as just custom event listener set up in the code, are not copied along with it. Okay, so remember that when you do a clone node, all right, and because a lot of we looked at some examples here in our demo where we did our event listeners, right? So if you've got an event listener or something and you use a clone node, it's not going to also bring that along with it, right? It's just going to basically just take care of the original code, so to speak, the original element, right? So any JavaScript properties separately attached, all JavaScript attached, right, to the original code. So it could be colors, style, all those things, right? Such as a custom event listener, like I said, are not copied along with it, all right? Passing true creates a deep copy. Okay, the node and every one of its descendants. Okay, so a deep copy is more than just that single one. If that thing had children and so forth, descendants, it's going to go ahead and copy that as well if you are using true, right? Passing false copies only the node itself, leaving any children behind. That's kind of sad, isn't it? But that's how that works. Okay, so here's a shallow copy, right? Setting clone node to false, right? So no children will be copied, right? A deep copy, you bring the node and all of its descendant. You're bringing everything, okay? Okay, so let's go back here now. So let's kind of look at this a little bit. So here's some mission queue cards below our existing DOM nodes. None of these buttons create new elements. They move and copy what's already here. Let's just refresh this to make sure we're good here. So we got mission alpha, beta, gamma, delta, right? A, B, G, D. Alpha, beta, gamma, delta. So we're going to append. We're going to move the first to the end. So alpha should move to the end, right? So move there. Move the last one to the front. So now it just moved it back to the front. Clone node false. This is a shallow copy. Okay. I don't know. We'll have to look at that. Clone node deep. That's not really. Oh. I wasn't paying attention. So we already looked at that one. Insert before, right? So let's see, move this. So we do append child, first element. It moves it, no duplicate created. The DOM automatically removes it from the old position. Right? Move first to the end, and then it removes it from the original position. Insert before, so we're doing the last element child to the first element child, right? So mission alpha moved from last to first. Insert before, new mode, reference mode, places the new node before the reference node. Append child can only add to the end. Okay. Insert before works anywhere. Okay, now let's do the clone. Shallow. So this is the empty one. Shallow clone has no children. All right. Let's see if this is going to be helpful for us here. We're just going to have to go look at the code a little bit. The original still has 2 elements. Children copied 0. It's just telling you what it did. Here's the clone tag. It just grabbed that. Okay. It didn't grab the children. If you click this one here, it's going to grab the original div tag plus all of its descendants, right? Any event listeners attached via the event listener on the original node are not copied by clone node. Only the DOM structure and HTML attributes are duplicated. Okay. All right. Let's look at the code a little bit on this one. Okay. So we're doing move to end was the first button. Q, let's go find our Q. Go to definition is our mission Q, right? It's defined. Then we're just appending the child, the first one, to that, right? So whenever you append, it's just going to, so here, calling append child on a node that already exists in the DOM does not create a duplicate. The browser automatically removes it from its current position first, then appends it to the end. So append child always is going to go, I guess it was important. Should have mentioned that earlier. Append child's always going to append it to the end, right? Append kind of means that. So it's always going to append it to the end. So it's just, in this case, you're taking the first one, and whenever you have a parent node and you do append child, whatever you send, it's always going to go to the end, right? In this case here was the button where you do the move to front, and that's just taking the insert before. So it's basically taking your last one, which is you're doing your Q, which if we click the first button, right, we ended up putting that alpha one ended up going to the end, right? So now this one would be our alpha one, and then whatever was alpha beta. Beta was the second one. So then after you move that to the end, beta would have been the first one in the list once that got moved from the previous one, right? Now you've got the last one is going to be alpha. The first one is beta, right? After, if you click the previous button, right? Once you click this new button. So then it's going to basically take and insert before. So it's going to take the last one and then insert that before the first one. Okay. And obviously you can, do things more complex than that, position-wise. If you know where something is position-wise, you can move something from the third element to the sixth element, etc., right? Just, just takes a little bit more work, a little more coding to do that. Okay. Our shallow copy, where we do clone node false, right? Shallow copy copies the element tag and its attributes, but not any of its child nodes, right? So it will copy that specific tag and any elements and attributes a part of that, right? That specific element, but any children to that element do not get copied. And then the other one was, that was the shallow one, right? If we do a clone node true, that's a deep copy, right? A deep copy recursively copies the elements and all of its descendants, child elements, text nodes, everything, right? The event listeners attached via are not copied. So always remember, no matter either one, the event listeners are not going to be copied, okay? Okay. So let's move on to the next thing here, which is some time commands. So we're going to do a little clock display, okay? Let's Let's go look at our guide here, running time commands. A time command runs a function or command block at a specified time or repeat it at set intervals, right? So repeating commands with set interval. So here you've got a variable called timer ID. You're using the built-in set interval, right? And then you've got a whatever your function name is, and then a number of milliseconds, right? So here you've got a function called advanced slide. Get element by ID, the gallery, and you're appending the child. Okay. So what happens here is when you're doing this to run this, right? You're running this as part of a timer with an interval, right? So you advance the slideshow automatically every 3 seconds. Okay. So you got your slide timer set interval. So here's your function. Here's the number. So when we talk about milliseconds, right, it's always going to be, thousands, right? 3,000 is 3 seconds. 10,000 is 10 seconds, okay? 1,000 is 1 second. So if you just had a 3 here, it's going to happen so fast you're not even going to see it. It'll be too quick for you to even see probably, right? So 3,000 is 3 seconds. Okay, stopping a time command. The clear interval method stops a repeating time command using the identifier value returned when the set interval was originally called. So here we're getting the document, got element by ID pause button. We're adding an event handler, right? So we're registering this event if you click the button, and we're clearing the interval, right? We're clearing the interval, which is the slide timer. Clear interval, so that clears it out, right? Time delay commands with set timeout. So the set timeout method runs a function exactly once after a specified delay rather than repeating the clear timeout. Okay, the clear timeout method cancels a pending delayed command before it has a chance to run. Okay. So here's a set timeout. Up here we were doing what? Set interval, right? Here was our set interval, right? But if you want to do a timeout that runs just exactly one time, right? You're going to use set timeout instead of set interval. Function name millisecond, same thing, right? And then you clear timeout as opposed to the other one where you clear the interval. Okay. So set interval repeats a function over and over at a fixed delay until stopped with clear interval. Set timeout runs a function exactly one time after a delay, can be canceled beforehand, clear timeout. So when would you want to do that? Sometimes people do that when you're making some kind of a call from your page to some external outside source, and you may want to, you could do that where you have some overlay, and then you go ahead and if it's fast enough, you could clear it out, okay? Clear the timeout, purposes like that, right? So like, let's just say you set it a delay of 10 seconds just to be safe, but then, if it comes back very quickly in 2 seconds, then you can just clear the timeout, right? Okay, let's go ahead and look at some code on this. All right, so we have our mission clock. Why don't we run it and look at it? It's always nice to see it run. So let me run this. Okay. So here, the clock uses set interval to update every second. Clear interval pauses it and the timer ID returned by set interval must be saved to a variable. It's the only way to stop the timer later. Okay, everyone just refresh this, make sure that something didn't get hosed. So we're going to start it. Okay, and then we pause it. Right. And now let's, when we click it again, it's just going to continue on. Clear interval is just going to basically pause it, right? Okay, let's reset that. So the set timeout plus clear timeout incoming signal. Set timeout fires once after a delay, right? Clear timeout cancels it if it's clicked before the delay expires. This contrasts with set interval, which repeats indefinitely. Okay. So let's click this. Clear timeout canceled, depending call out. The callback function was never called. The clear timeout works only before the delay expires. Okay. So let's just go ahead and run this one. So this was a 3-second delay. I did it very quickly. It canceled it. So let's just do this again. Let it sit. It'll arrive in 3 seconds. Boom. All right. So nothing, no single pending, nothing to abort. Right. So let's just do that one more time. Right. Ran exactly after a 3-second delay. There was no built-in way to cancel it now. It's already fired. Right. As opposed to this, and then you abort this. You aborted it before that completed. Like I said, timeout's very, very useful for things like, basic like page loads and stuff. There's other, other reasons as well, other purposes and reasons to use it. But, a lot of times pages have these like overlays and stuff, and it'll overlay so you don't click, especially like you would do a submit. Sometimes it's good when you do a submit on a page to kind of like, gray everything out just so that a user don't accidentally do multi-submissions, right? Good to protect from multi-submissions. Click it, something's slow, they click it again, right? If you have some kind of an overlay, and this is a good use of that timeout thing, you can have an overlay, right? But if it comes back quickly, then you can cancel the timeout, right? So. Okay, let's see if we want to look at the code here a little more again. What we're doing here, so the set interval here, format the seconds. So we're doing the hour, minute, second, just for display purposes, right? So hours is always divided by, 3,600, right? Then the minutes is going to basically be, yep. So here you're using modulus, right? And dividing that by 60 for minutes. Then you take your seconds, right? And modulus 60 for that, right? You don't have to worry about that too much at this point. And probably don't need to worry about pad start either. I think, the biggest thing here, don't worry about too much of this, just understanding about the timeout, when to use timeout, the interval, right? When to use it. It's pretty straightforward. Obviously you can make things more complicated if you need to, right? This isn't important like on the set timeout, right? You've got this delay in milliseconds like that, right? Up here on this, so this was for the set timeout, right? Your set interval. So here are your fires so this fired every second, right? It's constantly updating, right? Every second when you're clicking that and you're updating that clock. Whereas the timeout thing, right, was basically the delay is for 3 seconds, right? Unless it's been, unless you stop that. So, okay. I don't want to spend too much time on that. Let's look at the next part here. Okay. Working with pop-up windows. So a pop-up window is an external window displayed on top or alongside the application content. System dialog boxes and pop-up browser windows are both examples. All right. So here's a system dialog box, right? Where you just have a pops up and it's an okay, right? So different kinds, right? You have a window alert, right? Now you can put window dot alert, right? But actually all you really have to do is put alert, right? Okay, and now so for confirm, you have an option to do okay or cancel, right? And then you have what's called a prompt window where it has a message and also has a default value, okay? And then the entered text or string or null if canceled. So let's go ahead and look at those. Here, let's look at this real quick. Cancel the order, document right, window.prompt. Okay, let's just go look at that. Well, we'll do them all at one time, I guess, in the demo. So window.open will actually open up a new window. Method opens a new browser window or tab, and its appearance and behavior controlled by an optional argument string, right? So you can add some additional functionality there, okay? Window.open. It actually is opening a whole new little browser window, right? So I'm sure that you've experienced that before, different things where you click something, it opens it like almost a separate little window. You filled something out, hit it okay, went back to the parent window, right? You got kind of a parent window and a child window relationship there as well, right? But you know, you can set the width, you can set the height, you can make it resizable if the user wants to resize it, right? The window that you're opening can a different file, right? It can be a different file. Generally, is a different file, right? And you may run some kind of a function on it as well, right? So once saved to a variable, the pop-up window's own properties and methods can be used in later statements. And its opener property, right? The opener is basically the parent window, refers back to the window that opened it, okay? Writing content to a pop-up window. Document properties and methods can be applied to a pop-up window by referencing its document property. Okay. Limitations of pop-up browser windows. Browsers commonly block pop-ups that open without a direct user action, such as a click. Pop-ups do not scale well to small mobile screens. A pop-up window cannot display files stored only on a local computer. The exact appearance and support for pop-ups features vary across browsers. Okay, let's go ahead and look at these. Let's do a refresh on this. So we've got our window alert. It's just like that, right? We have a window confirm, right? Where you've got a message here, you got your message, you got either okay or cancel. You know, this is maybe for something, you know, delete this or whatever, right? Do you agree or disagree, right? You got okay, cancel, alert. You don't have just saying, kind of just a, you know, a information thing, hey, just this, and then you hit okay, right? Here you either go okay or cancel, right? Either one. So let's see what I printed out. If I had okay there, yeah, okay. Okay was clicked, return true. So it's returning that, you know, you return false because you click cancel. Window.prompt, okay? Here, so window.prompt return pilot, log entry, pilot, assigned to mission alpha. All right. And then we've got window.open. Okay, window.open, this is going to open a new window being 500 by 400 pixels and writes content to it via its document reference. Note, modern browser may redirect this to a new tab. Yeah. So, some of this stuff can work a little bit differently, especially the the window related stuff can work a little differently depending on what browsers you're using. So here you're just doing a window.open, right? And this is obviously styled kind of nicely. It's got some nice stuff here, and you got a little close here. So either you can, usually you should always want to have a close also in here. You can always hit the X here. It's always nice to have a close here as well, though, right? Centered pop-up screen object, so you're centering it right here in the middle of the thing, right? Okay, and then since we're here, so let's look at the overlay. Click any mission card below. One shared event handler reads this .dataset.title and this .dataset.detail from whichever card was clicked. No separate function needed per card. So this is kind of just doing this little dialogue that has this overlay as well, right? Has this overlay, right? Kind of nice, right? Okay, so let's look at this code a little bit for these. Okay, so here's the basic alert, right? You can use these right in your code if possible, if needed. And this is just writing to that text box on the screen, but so you're just doing an alert, right? This is going to have an OK button. You're done. It's just an alert. Confirm. Window.confirm. It's going to abort the mission. This cannot be undone. So it's either going to be yes or no, right? It's going to be OK or cancel, right? It's going to return, confirm. This is going to return something, right? Alert is not going to return anything for you to do anything with. But a confirm, right? A confirm will return. Okay, let's go why don't we go and look at that in the debugger. Let's go look at that in the debugger. I think that's a good idea on this one. So which one? Confirm. Let's just hit refresh here. Let's go to our spend some time at that. Sources. Kind of lost everything at some point. Let's search for it. All right. So here's our confirm. So let's just put it, there's our breakpoint. Okay. And I'm just going to choose confirm here. And either OK or cancel. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK here. And if I just hover over this confirm, you're going to see it's true. All right. So I'm going to, sometimes you got to know these controls for debugger. It depends on how big your screen is, where they're going to be. I know it can be confusing. It's kind of, something you got to get used to. It happens to me all the time. Where'd this go? And got to figure out where things are now that, just takes time to get used to it, and you kind of got to work with it because there is a lot of functionality, a lot going on here, right? We haven't really looked at a lot of these other tabs. There's a lot of other functionality as well that could be beneficial, but as of right now, we're not really worried about that. But so we still have that. Let's see, we're still open here in the debugger. Let's go ahead and click this to the end. So let's run this one more time and click on this again. This time we'll hit cancel. So once it gets here, we're just going to go ahead and hover over this, and it's false. All right. So last time it was confirmed was true, it's going to do that, else it's going to do this. So it's going to come basically down here, right? If I go ahead and go forward, there, it went down here because it's false. Pretty basic there, but okay. So that's that one. So since we're here, might as well do the window prompt one, right? Window.prompt, enter a thing. let's go ahead and click this. Okay, so we'll have that, whatever returns there. You know, these are just good for getting used to using a debugger, seeing how to look at variables and their name. Obviously, you can also do a watch on these. Let's do both here. Let's might as well just do both here real quick. Pilot. All right, so let's do a window.prompt. And yeah, we'll just leave it commander by default because that put that default in there in the code by default. We're going to hit OK here. And then just over there, you got commander, right? And then here, it's not available. Why is it not available? Because I put pilot and not pilot name, right? Should be able to edit this, right? Pilot name. There we go. So there you go. So a couple different ways. You know, you put breakpoints, hover. Also, you can use the watches as well. You know, especially if you're doing something complex, you can have multiple watches in here. Right? Yeah. And then let's just put another name to see it override that. I'm just going to put somebody's name. Let's put in Susan. I don't know where I came up with Susan at, but you know. Okay. So once again, there it is. Also, if you hover over it, there's Susan, right? Okay. Let's get rid of that breakpoint. And we'll get rid of that too. Okay. Window.open. Yeah, let's look at some of these, more of these, right? Write HTML pop-ups document, right? It's going to be better for me to look at the code. So our pop-ups, so we did the prompt, and then here's our pop-up, right? Pop-up window, window.open. Yes, you can do this. No, you don't. You know, this is just generally creating this. Obviously, there's other ways to do that. It was blocked by the browser. Okay. Centered pop-up. This isn't really returning much of anything, so I'm not going to worry about this. Okay. So yeah, these didn't really return anything. Oh, these weren't the ones. Yeah. You're just closing it, right? Centered. We're not passing anything, right? Let's go look at the overlay a little bit. We don't necessarily have to get into the all the details on doing the overlays, right? Show overlay. I just don't want to spend all that time on that because that probably isn't really the purpose of what we're doing here on the document object model at this point. The important thing is here is you're kind of appending things again, right? You're building that. You're building all of this out. Creating new elements for the div, the H2, the paragraph. You're building this all out using document.object model. Whereas this other one over here, you're actually just using document.write just to create the whole document. Down here for your overlays, you're basically using your DOM, right, to create all your elements, append them to create this, right? Close overlay. Okay. So like I said, I don't really want to get into the, you can look at the code if you want to spend the time, look at the CSS and stuff about overlaying that. Just want to kind of show you what an overlay does. But it's not really that important to understand all that at this point. So, okay, let's see what else we have. Okay, so now let's talk about the this object, right? So inside an event handler or event listener, the this object references the object that initialized the event, often the specific element the user interacted with. This makes it possible to write one shared function that responds regardless, right? Correctly, regardless of which element is triggered, right? So in this case, you can see you got this, right? So cloned image, this dot cloned node, right? So this is going to refer to what is actually called it, right? What referenced this, right? JavaScript. This refers to whichever thumbnail was clicked, right? So when you click the thumbnail, right, that it would be this. That would be the one that instantiated it, right, made it happen would be this at that point, right? And we'll look at, yeah, let's just go look at that real quick here. What we got here? Guess I got crazy going down here. Overlay. I might not have an example here on that. Let's see what we had here. We do this at all? No, maybe not. No, probably not. Okay, that's okay. That's okay. We'll talk about that more. But always remember this, object references the object that initiated the event, right? So whenever you see this, think to yourself, okay, what I'm, what's important is, what initiated this? What initiated this? And so in this case, it would be whatever, whichever thumbnail was clicked, right? So if you had 10 different thumbnails, right, and clicked it, it would be referring to that one that clicked it, right, not the other ones. Removing a node. So you also have the option to remove children. Remove child method deletes a node from the document, taking the node to be removed and calling the method on its parent. All right. In this case, you were doing remove child. So you always can remove any child. Just like you add child, you can also remove the child. And in this case, it was with references to the overlay, right? That you click it, and then you want to kind of remove that. That's how you can remove it. Design web apps so that adding new content, removing it, or restructuring the page can be handled by small reusable functions like this one. A modular structure is far easier to update later as needs change. Okay, let's look at the exploring the browser object. The BOM. The browser object model describes the browser window itself and the objects nested within it. Okay. We've talked about it already a little bit, in the past, okay? But the window object sits on top of this structure and is called the global object, right? So when you've got your browser window open, right? When you think window, think the BOM, right? The project object model. The DOM, the document object model, is basically your HTML document, right? That's your HTML document from HTML all the way to the end. That's your DOM. Your BOM is basically the window itself. Okay, it's a global object, and it has reference to the document, right? The BOM includes the DOM, right? But it also includes other things like history and location and navigator and screen. Okay, it has these other things as well. The history object. So the history object stores the history list. The page opens during the current browsing session. For privacy and security, it does not expose the actual page contents or addresses. It only allows navigation. So, you can always have on your pages a back button or a forward button, especially, if you're moving through some different browser windows, right? It's possible to do that. And you hit the back button or the, obviously hitting the back button is kind of the same thing as up here at the top on the left. You got your arrows, right? But you can actually control some things within your page too. You can do history.back and that will go to the previous screen, or history.forward, right? And you do have additional information on that. You could go back 2 pages or, right? So you have a lot of options here. The history is going to hold on to all that history that's in that object of that session, right? Within the browser, current browsing session, right? Once you close it, that's gone, right? We're not talking about your history like tracked in, the different browsers where you can go back and look at your history from a long time ago, right? The history, it's a little different, whereas it's kind of really just the current browsing session, right? Once you bring up a new browser, actually even a new tab, right? You don't have that history there, right? You're starting from scratch again. Also, there's the location object, stores information about the page currently open in the browser. It's available as a property of both window object and the document object, right? So it's available in both. Location.href, host name, just the domain name. The navigator object. So the navigator object provides information about the user's browser, right? Mainly useful for debugging or confirming browser compatibility. Okay. Now, I just also want to mention, kind of somewhat on subject, a little off. Whenever you send a request, so say a backend server, it knows where that request came from, and it knows what kind of browser you're using, what kind of operating system, right? So sometimes there's benefits in that, and that's how they actually gather statistics and stuff too, like that, right? But that's done differently. That's kind of done with the header of a request. We talked about the request and response, HTTP request and response. Well, they'll also have what's called headers, and it's within that header, right? It does share that information in that header, right, with the server. When you're making a request to a server, that server gets that information and knows what that is, right? Rather than relying solely on navigator objects to guess the browser support, a try-catch statement that attempts to use a feature directly. Yeah, and most of the time, it's not necessary to do that, especially nowadays. But if you're trying to use some newer functions, right, some newer, brand new stuff, you're probably not going to read about it in a book unless you're really looking, you're really, are in tune to some new functionality coming out in the browser, and you want to try it, and it may not work in some other browsers, right? But there are some certain functionality. You get into some complicated web design and development. There is some certain function, just say it's only newer stuff. There is some certain functionality that's supported in one browser than the other, right? But for the most part, in most things you do, you shouldn't have a problem, right? The screen object. So the screen object stores information about the user's display, including its resolution. This is commonly used to center a new pop-up window or on a screen, right? So yeah, you can actually figure out what's going on within that browser window, within that screen itself, right? Within a screen. It has some certain information that's available, right? So designing successful web apps, let's see. Yep. So know your users and how they like to use the app. Provide constant, clear feedback so users always know the app's current state. Anticipate the graceful handling. Use errors rather than letting the app fail silently. Keep your interface focused and simple, avoiding unnecessary complexity. But I kind of got a little head there. Let's at least go look a little bit on the bomb stuff in the demo. Okay, so let's see. Here's the browser object model. What are we doing here? We're getting the location, href, hostname, protocol, right? So lots of different ones are available. And actually, if you go in, we'll go ahead once we get into the page. We can go look at all this stuff. Window.location, window.navigator, or just location by itself. Okay. And then you got history here. History.length equals 1, history.back. Okay. So yeah, let's go ahead and look at that a little bit here real quick. So not a lot. Inspect BOM objects and history.back. So let's see if this is going to work for me. So if this may be a problem because I'm using that. Let me see if this is going to be okay. Maybe. So we do have a back now, right? I'm just wondering if this is going to work. We're going to find out here real quickly. So history.back, let's see if this is actually, there we go, right? So history.back actually went to the previous screen, right? This one I couldn't because it was just brought up right here, right? So it didn't have a back, but now it has a back, and then it'll go back, right? And we'll look at the different things. So it's telling me the location. So we're using the, we're using the, what do you call it, live server. So this is our local host, right? HTTP. We're not doing HTTPS here or anything, but it's giving us some additional information here about our screen width, our screen height, right? So let's see if we can kind of make this a little smaller here. And let's see if this changes. I'm hoping it does. So boom. Maybe I need to refresh this. No, this is just giving us the whole screen. Okay. I was hoping. All right. But history, 2 pages in session history, right? So if I would have started this without just at the, before I had a back page, that would be 1, right? So this is also telling us, look, you're using, and this is kind of by default for Windows. It's always going to be like NT, it's telling us a Windows 64 machine, stuff like that. This is kind of pretty this is pretty standard for Windows is what you're going to get for the most part, right? Unless you have an older machine. Tells you the language you're using. So this information is all available within the browser object model, okay? The location, navigator, information about the browser and information, right? Your screen size, screen height, history, all right. The global object. Let's see, type of objects. No, okay. Nothing special there. All right. Let's go and go back in history. All right. So let's just review this real quick here. So just foundations of web app, basically HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and you're working with data too. So even though we didn't hit any external data for any of this, right? Even though we didn't access any external data, we did have some, an array. We had an array that we used kind of, mock data could be called. So we had some data that we actually accessed for that mission stuff, right? Node tree is a hierarchical structure of nodes. The root node sits at the top. Okay. The root node sits at the top, right? And then, a parent node, different children could have different parents, right? So if you've got a body tag, right, and you have a main tag, the body tag is the parent of the main tag, right? But if you've got a main tag, a body tag, a main tag, and then you've got a section tag, right? The main tag is the parent of the section tag, etc., right? It's just the closest relative up the ladder, so to speak, right? Up the tree. Query.selector all builds a static node list using the CSS style selector, right? Document fragment, nodes combined in memory, not yet attached to a page. So remember, a document fragment, when we do a create element, we create a new element. We haven't appended to anything, right? It's not attached to the page yet, It's just called a document fragment until it is actually attached to, some other element on that page, right? So we have both create element and append, right? So create element obviously creates a new node, then attaches it to the existing node using the append child. Text content versus inner HTML. Plain text only, right? Text content plain versus interpreted markup. Inner HTML will be the interpreted markup language, right? Whereas the text content is just plain text, right? Plain text for text content. Inner HTML is the actually interpreted markup language. So if you got a tag and you got some value in there, it's going to read that value, right? Insert before places a node at a specific position, not just the end. Clone node, true or false, a deep copy with descendants, right? That's true, right? Or shallow copy is node only, which would be false, right? So you have two options there. Then we have both the set interval and the clear interval. This repeats a function on a timer, right? So you start it, right? And you set your interval, and then clear interval, kind of pause it, right? And then you can kind of set your interval again, and it'll keep on running, right? It just stops the repetition, the clear, right? Now your set timeout, clear timeout runs a function once after a delay. So it's set timeout's going to have a delay. And in our case, we looked at something where we had 3,000 milliseconds, right? So 3,000 milliseconds is 3 seconds. So we have that 3-second delay, right? And if we could actually cancel it beforehand, right? We could clear the timeout, and it's only going to happen is if you clear that timeout prior to that 3-second delay, right? Otherwise, it's going to run. Window confirm or prompt. So a window confirm returns a true or false, right? You either hit OK or cancel. A window.prompt actually returns some data back, right? Returns some data to the main page, right? The main screen from that little window prompt, right? That's where you type a value in there. Window confirm, it's either going to be true or false, right? We looked at that in the debugger, so you know how to do that. Window.open opens a new pop-up browser window or tab. Okay. There's different options for that, okay, on what you open up and what size it is and everything else, right? Overlay modal is a layer on top of a page that must be closed to continue, okay? And a lot of times that's good for certain things. Like I said, sometimes when you're submitting a form and stuff, an overlay is nice for that. You submit the form, you have this little overlay, and then thank you for your request, and then or your submit. So you're gathering that as opposed to, and especially when you do a form submit, and on a page, it's a little different if we're just doing static stuff within our browser and so forth. If you're actually sending it to a back-end server, and like I mentioned already, a user, and users do this, they'll submit it and then all of a sudden nothing happened, they'll just submit it again, or people actually double click sometimes, right? All kinds of things like that. So always good, different things you can do. And obviously you can have, once you click it, you can, multiple things you probably should do. You should disable the button, right? So someone don't click it again. But also it's nice to have a nice overlay too, because sometimes you might submit something and you kind of want to wait for it to come back, right? That it submitted correctly and then came back, you got a response back from the server, and then you had your overlay, and that overlay goes away, right? So that the user knows, oh yeah, it was successful. If you just do a successful thing in the JavaScript side, you don't know what really happened on the server side, right? So okay, this object, we talked about this object. It refers to whichever object triggered the current event, right? So whenever you have some kind of an event, if you're referencing this, it's which one called it, right? You can actually trace and get a lot of information. You can get the name of that event, everything else, right? Or not the event, the whichever object triggered it, right? You get information on that object. or do some specific thing just for that, right? Change the color of it, do whatever, right? Remove child. So it deletes a node called on its parent, right? So you can remove a specific child, right? But you call that from the parent, right? Because that's obviously parent-child relationship there. And then you've got your, obviously, your BOM objects. Window, which is global. You got your document, you got history, location, navigator, and screen. So okay, so that's all I have. I will make this guide obviously available and also the demo. Please, spend a little time with it. I encourage you, and especially, try to get used to doing little things with the debugger. I probably should have gave you last week. I should have probably provided a little more information on debugging, but just we had some better things to run through the debugger with this week. So, please spend a little time with that. Let me know if you have any questions, and have a great day. Thanks.